Everyone is leaving Chicago. Nobody wants to live there. Why would you move there? If you have been thinking about moving to Chicago, you probably heard some version of this. So let me give you a number. 2,731,585. That is Chicago's estimated population as of July 2025, according to the latest numbers from the Census Bureau. And here's the part that you probably did not hear. That number is up, not down. It's up for the third year in a row. Since 2022, Chicago has added around 51,000 people. The city is now back to within 1% of its 2020 population. So no, everyone is not leaving Chicago. But before you take that as a proof that Chicago is suddenly booming, there's one number that I need you to see. Because the city is still growing, but that growth slowed dramatically in the most recent year. And if you're thinking that slowdown will make Chicago homes cheaper, this is where the story gets really strange. While population growth is slowing, buyers in some Chicago neighborhoods are still competing against 10, 15, even 20 offers for one home. So how can both of these things be happening at the same time? That is what we're going to unpack. I will show you what is actually happening to Chicago's population, where Illinois residents are moving, which states are sending people to Illinois, and what all of it really means if you're thinking about buying a home here. And stay with me because the housing market is where this story takes a turn that most people completely miss. If we haven't met, I'm Dee Savic. I lived in Chicago for 27 years and I've been selling homes here for 24 of them. I have this conversation all the time. Someone is seriously considering a move to Chicago and someone in their life is warning them not to do it based on a headline they saw. So let's separate the headlines from what the numbers actually tell us. First, we need to acknowledge the part of the story that's true. Chicago's population fell during the first few years of pandemic, but Chicago was not the only city going through that. New York, San Francisco, Boston, and other dense cities were dealing with many of the same forces. Offices closed, transit emptied out, people who could work from anywhere suddenly had the option to go somewhere with more space and less people. International migration also slowed dramatically during the pandemic. That's increased and births declined, and all of these things affected population count. So yes, Chicago lost population, but the idea that millions of people looked at Chicago specifically and suddenly decided the city was finished and started running for the exits is not what the data shows. Then the direction changed. Chicago grew in 2023, it grew again in 2024, and it grew again in 2025, reaching an estimated 2.73 million people. That is 3 consecutive years of growth. Now, I'm not saying that this is some massive population boom because it's not. What happened is much simpler. The decline stopped and the city started gaining people again. But the fact that Chicago gained population got nowhere near the attention the decline did. Because everyone is leaving Chicago makes a way better headline than Chicago quietly gained residents for a third year. If population loss has been one of the reasons you're afraid to move here, this is the first thing that I want you to understand. You would not be moving into a city that everyone else is abandoning. But the fact that Chicago grew does not tell us how strong that growth is. For that, we need to look at the second number. According to the latest census estimates, Chicago added roughly 28,000 people between 2023 and 2024. Between 2024 and 2025, it added only 5,253. The city was still moving in the right direction, but it added far fewer people than it had the year before. That is where the story becomes more complicated than either side wants it to be. One person can look at the data and say Chicago is growing again. Another can look at the same data and say Chicago's growth is rapidly slowing. And both statements are technically true. What is not reasonable is turning either one into a prediction that Chicago is about to explode in population or collapse. The most recent increase was only about 0.2% in a city of more than 2.7 million people. That is not nothing, but it's also not enough to transform the city overnight. To understand what could be affecting the direction from here, we need to look at migration. And this is where we need to make an important distinction. The next numbers cover the entire state of Illinois, not just city of Chicago. They can't tell us exactly who's moving into or out of Chicago, but they can show us something that usual migration headlines leave out. People are moving in both directions. The Census Bureau tracks moves between states, and in most recent year available, the number one source of people moving to Illinois was Texas with more than 18,000 people. Number two was California with more than 15,000. Then Wisconsin, Indiana, Florida, New York each sending somewhere between 11 and 14,000. And after those, Missouri, Michigan, Ohio, and Iowa. Add up just those 10 states, and you get about 120,000 people moving into Illinois in a single year. Now, look at the names at the top of that list. Texas and Florida are constantly described as the places that everyone is moving to. But there are also two of the largest sources of people moving into Illinois. California and New York are constantly described as states that everyone is fleeing, yet thousands of people moved from both of those states into Illinois in a single year. That doesn't mean that Illinois gained more people from those states than it lost to them. We're talking about the number moving in, not the net result. And this can be confusing, but that distinction matters. When you hear that 10,000 people left one state for another, it can sound like everyone is moving in one direction. In reality, people are moving back and forth all the time. So if you're considering a move from Texas, California, Florida, or New York to Chicago, you're not doing something unusual. Thousands of people are making that same state-to-state move. Now let's look at the other direction. The number one destination for people leaving Illinois was not Florida, it was not Texas, and it was not Arizona like everyone here thinks. It was Indiana. More than 25,000 people moved from Illinois to Indiana in the most recent year of data. After Indiana came Florida, Wisconsin, Texas, California, Missouri, Michigan, Tennessee, Iowa, and Arizona. Again, these are the statewide numbers. They don't tell us that all 25,000 people who left Chicago or moved to Northwest Indiana. But the list does show that a large amount of migration is regional. 5 of the top 10 destinations were nearby Midwestern states. That's a very different picture from the idea that everyone leaving Illinois is packing up for Florida or Texas. Some people are moving across the country, others are staying in Midwest, closer to family, work, or the life that they already know. And for someone comparing Chicago with Northwest Indiana, there's an obvious financial reason that conversation comes up so often. Property taxes. Illinois has one of the highest effective property tax rates in the country, approximately 1.79% of homes value compared with approximately 0.76% in Indiana. Now, those are statewide averages, but they help illustrate why the difference gets people's attention. Take a $750,000 home. At an effective rate of 1.79%, the annual property tax would be approximately $13,400. At 0.76%, it would be approximately $5,700. That is the difference of roughly $7,700 a year. That doesn't mean that every $750,000 home in Illinois or Indiana will have those exact taxes. It's just simplified comparison using statewide averages. And in Cook County, 2 homes with similar values can have a very different tax bill depending on the property, location, assessed value, and exemptions, of course. That is why I always tell buyers to look at the actual bill for the actual home. Don't assume that 2 similarly priced properties will cost the same to own. Income taxes are another part of the comparison. Illinois has a flat individual income tax rate of 4.95%. Indiana's state individual income tax rate is 2.95% in 2026, with an additional county income tax that varies depending on where you live. So yes, the tax difference can be meaningful. It's one reason someone might compare a home in Chicago with home across the Indiana border. But I would not tell you taxes explain every move from Illinois to Indiana. The census number shows us where people moved. They do not tell us why each person made that decision. Housing prices, space, work, family, retirement, and lifestyle can all be a part of it. What I can tell you is that property taxes are a real cost of owning a home in Chicago, and they often surprise buyers relocating from another state. Now, that is not a reason to rule Chicago out. It is a reason to understand the complete monthly cost before you fall in love with a property. This is the part that most population stories miss. A city can have slow population growth and still have an extremely competitive housing market. What matters is how many buyers want the type of a home you want in the neighborhood you want, and how many of those homes are available. And the demand is not spread evenly across Chicago. And right now, inventory in many north side neighborhoods is extremely low. In June, the Chicago Association of Realtors counted about 1,300 single-family homes and 2,100 attached properties on the market in the entire city. That is the lowest they have on record going back to 2008. So let me make that real for you. I had a buyer make an offer on a $750,000 home in Uptown. They offered $100,000 over asking with 20% down, as is, a full appraisal gap waiver, and they lost. Another buyer offered $50,000 over asking on a property in Andersonville. They lost too. And on one of the homes that my buyer did win this year, we were one of 20 offers. 20 offers for one house in a city that supposedly nobody wants to live in. That is the contradiction. Chicago's population increased by only a small amount, but the supply of desirable homes in certain neighborhoods is even smaller compared with the numbers of buyers who want them. Chicago is not building enough of type of homes that buyers want to buy and affordable homes in every neighborhood where they want it. And homeowners with low mortgage rates are still reluctant to sell and replace those loans with higher ones. That is why slow population growth doesn't automatically mean lower home prices. Could the market change? Absolutely. But a citywide population headline alone can't tell you when to buy or what a specific home is worth. And if you're buying a home and you plan to hold for 15 or 20 years, you may be wondering whether population decline could eventually affect its value. The honest answer is that nobody knows exactly what Chicago is going to look like in 2046. But we do have the last few years to look at. During the pandemic, when Chicago experienced its largest population losses, home prices did not fall. The Case-Shiller Chicago Index rose about 28% between January of 2020 and December of 2022. And in 2021 alone, it was up more than 12%. The years the city was losing the most people were the years that prices climbed almost 30%. And in the latest Case-Shiller reading, Chicago led all 20 major metros with home values up approximately 6.9% year over year. Population matters over the long term, but it's only one part of what determines the value of your home. So, is everyone leaving Chicago? No. Chicago has grown for 3 consecutive years and is now back to within about 1% of its 2020 population. Growth slowed significantly in the most recent year, and Illinois continues to lose residents to other states. That is the fact. But that does not mean buyers will suddenly find an abundance of homes in the Chicago neighborhoods they want most. That depends on the neighborhood, the type of a home, a local inventory, and how many buyers are competing for it. The population story is more complicated than either everyone is leaving Chicago or Chicago is booming. And slow population growth does not automatically mean lower prices. I'm Dee Savic. For the last 24 years, I've been helping people make their move to Chicago and find a neighborhood and a home that fit their life. And if you're seriously considering a move, feel free to reach out. My phone number is on the screen and in the description. And if you're moving to Chicago in the next 6 to 12 months, subscribe. I put out a new Chicago breakdown every week. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.